Welcome to State of Ed, a podcast about education inside the classroom and out. My name is Marc, and I'm here today at Visti 19 with a very special guest, Tamara Letter, who is the author of A Passion for Kindness, Making the World a Better Place to Lead, Love, and Learn. She's also the Teacher of the Year for the Mechanicsville Elementary School in Virginia. It's a great pleasure to have you here on the podcast today, Tamara.
Thank you so much for inviting me, Marc. I'm so excited to speak with you today.
Thank you so much. And I know you're super busy here. You're one of the organizers, and you're taking on all kinds of responsibilities. You're keynoting, you're organizing, you're packing bags for the attendees. Let's just jump right into it. I really enjoyed your book. And you start early on in the book talking about your 40th birthday and how you set a challenge for yourself that you were going to perform 40 random acts of kindness. So how did that decision wind up changing you?
Well, when I first started, I didn't realize it at the time, but it actually was more selfish because I was just doing it more for me. Like I wanted to do something different for my birthday, and it was something fun and new. It's something that's stretching myself a little bit. And by the time I got about halfway through doing it, I started realizing that not only was I enjoying the process of doing it, but I was actually seeking out ways to be kinder to other people and noticing things I hadn't seen before in just the community around me. And so by the time I got closer to finishing my 40 acts of kindness, as I mentioned in the book, there was the tragedy at Sandy Hook. Mm-hmm. And so for me, that was just a catalyst moment of realizing that we need more good in the world to kind of balance out the things that we're hearing about and seeing about that are not that great and horrific sometimes. Mm. And so when I made the decision to continue doing the random acts of kindness beyond my 40th birthday, I think it was in that moment that I realized that this is actually a part of who I am and who I'm supposed to be. And so that was an easy decision to make. And I haven't stopped since.
It's amazing. I know in the book you go into your 100th a random act of kindness
and
yes. beyond. And in the book you share a lot about yourself and a lot of personal things about mm-hmm. you. And as I'm reading it, it reminded me how much bravery there really is that's required to share your truth with the world. But in a sense, that's what makes it so impactful. So how did you get the bravery to tell your story so candidly?
Well, I think if you're going to represent yourself in a very real way with other people and to be authentic to who you are and what you represent, you do have to be a little vulnerable in that manner. And so it takes courage to be kind. It takes courage to be vulnerable. It takes courage to be an educator. And so to meld those three things together, it was one of those things that I can't not explain those things because they make me who I am. So the bad circumstances that I've lived through and gone through might actually be a support line for someone else. But if I don't tell my story and I don't share it with them, then they would never know that they're not alone in that same struggle or strife. And so I feel like anytime that we go through a circumstance that could benefit someone else, that's a great opportunity to uplift and inspire others through our life journey.
I couldn't agree with you more. You tell a story about balloons in your book. Can you just share that or retell that story for the listeners?
Oh, for the act of kindness
yes.
At the playground?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
I love that story.
So that was actually the very first act of kindness I did for Sandy Hook. When that tragedy happened, I really was paralyzed as an educator because I teach in an elementary school and school shootings were not new, but I had not yet encountered one that had happened at an elementary school so viciously. And it was, oh my goodness, it was December 12th. It was right before Christmas, and little children that were massacred essentially in their own school, in their safe zone. And being an elementary school teacher, being a mother of a young child at that time, it just paralyzes you. What do you do? How can you possibly move on past this? So when I made the decision to do an act of kindness in memory of each of the lives lost in that tragedy, I wanted to get to know the people that were no longer with us. I wanted the world to know their names. I felt their names were very important. They shouldn't be forgotten. And I wanted each of my acts of kindness to somehow either represent them or be in honor of them or align with a passion of theirs. And so the very first one I did was for Noah Posner, and he was 6 years old when he lost his life in that tragedy. And so it was a very simple act of kindness. I just went to the Dollar Tree and bought 6 smiley face balloons because all the articles I had read about him said he was such a happy little kid. And so I thought, smiley face balloons, that's perfect. So
Right.
I went to a playground in our local community, and I tied them to the fence, and I even put a quarter on the bottom of each of the strings just as an extra surprise and also to keep it weighted down. And I just had a simple little handwritten sign that said, "Free balloons in honor of Noah Posner." And before I'd even finished tying the balloons to the fence, I had little kids around me, and a little person was saying, "Can I have a balloon?" And, "Oh, of course, please have a balloon." And, so I'm passing out the balloons before I've even gotten a chance to take a picture of all 6 of them, And I turned, and there was a grandmother that was there with her grandchildren. And everything was still raw and real right after that tragedy. And so when she realized why I was doing the act of kindness, she started to cry, which of course made me cry. I feel like no one should cry alone. So if you need a friend to cry with, please cry with me. I'll cry with you. But yeah, she started to tear up, and I did too. And we hugged each other. And it was in that moment when I hugged her that I realized, kindness heals broken hearts. It doesn't always heal them instantly, but at least plants a seed that will eventually grow to be able to mend that. And if I can do my little part, and you do your little part, and other people do their parts too, then maybe we actually can do some good in this world.
Right. Almost like building a tapestry of kindness.
Yeah, absolutely.
So in the book, you talk about the science of kindness. And so what is that exactly?
So the science of kindness, a lot of people will say, "Oh, kindness, it's such a frou-frou thing," or "Oh, it's a soft skill." Like you hear all of these, just people trying to maybe make it seem like it's not as important as something else. But I was doing research with the Random Act of Kindness Foundation, and it was on their website that I had discovered that there really is science behind kindness. And the way that our bodies are biologically made, they have done MRI imaging to show that when you are engaged in kindness, whether it's thinking about kindness or actually performing an act of kindness, receiving kindness, you actually have chemicals released in your body. Serotonin, oxytocin, you have lots of different chemicals that give you those feel-good feelings. And they used to call it the helper's high. They've had all these little nicknames for it. But at the end of the day, your bodies are actually made to be kind to others. They're made because we're all in this together. And so I found it just fascinating that there's something we can actually do to make ourselves feel good, to make other people feel good in the process, and having the scientific community start to explore these areas is very exciting indeed.
When I read that, it reminded me of the work of Dr. Masaru Emoto. I don't know if you're familiar with his work. So he did all of these experiments where he captured water and he kind of flash froze water. But while he was doing that, he would say either positive or kind words or negative or hurtful words. And then he basically captured the images of the crystallization of the water molecules.
Oh, wow.
And you can't even imagine the differences in the crystallization patterns. The ones that were captured during positive phrases are these beautiful sort of tableaus, if you will. And then the ones where it's negative are dark and they literally match. And it just shows that the energy, he's basically proving that the energy that comes out of you, even when you're saying a word, and he tried this in different languages also, and it worked in all the different languages that he tried. I'll put a link to some of his work on the show notes. But it kind of mirrors exactly what you're saying in terms of the science of kindness, that the energy that you literally release out of you when you say positive words or words of affirmation, you're putting positive energy and vibes into the world just through the use of your words alone.
That's fascinating.
Yeah, I was blown away. Someone, a guidance counselor in my school had shown me the work of Dr. Emoto, and I couldn't believe it. I thought it was, I when I first saw it, I thought it was maybe not exactly all that. But then I read this book that she gave me, and it's incredible.
When they say that if you talk kindly to your plants, that they'll grow better.
Right.
So,
That was the premise that started his
oh,
work,
really?
actually.
Interesting.
Yeah,
Nice.
exactly
Yeah.
right. So I follow you on Twitter, and I noticed that you saw Hamilton recently.
Oh my goodness.
So
Yes.
let's just spend the rest of the time talking about how amazing Hamilton. I had a chance to see it on Broadway. What did you think?
Oh, what is there not to think? It was
Mm.
fantastic. The music was amazing. The choreography was spellbinding. I could not stop watching all the intricacies with the choreographed acts. And the storyline itself was just, it's fabulous. I love all the intricacies in the storyline. I love the humor that is built into the
Mm-hmm.
song lyrics. And I love the fact that everything was done as a musical, but you didn't quite feel like you were in a musical. You really felt like you were in a play.
Right.
So I thought they just did a magnificent job with it.
Yeah, I totally agree. I saw it on the day that the soundtrack came out. I
Oh,
saw it early
wow.
on with the original cast on Broadway. And as soon as we got up from the subway and I had a signal, I downloaded it on iTunes and I basically listened to it for maybe 4 months straight. And every time my kids, I would take them someplace in the car, they would say, "Dad, do we have to listen?" I was like, "Shush, you're ruining the show for me."
Right.
But since we're talking about Broadway, you mentioned Les Miserables.
Oh, I love that. That was my favorite.
Me too. We're definitely we have the same taste in musicals for sure. And you talk about how the show almost is propelled by an act of kindness when Jean Valjean
Yes.
is staying at the inn and the or not at the inn. Is it at the inn or is it the church?
He's staying with the church rector.
Sure,
Yeah.
that's right. And he gives him the additional candlesticks on top of everything.
After he stole them. Like
That's
he
right.
legitimately stole them and was like, but he was desperate and he was trying to find his way.
Right. So for me, that obviously propels the whole story, not just the plot of the story, but the emotional journey that the character takes and why he makes this vow and why he dedicates his life.
Yes.
And all the decisions that he makes stems from that one act of kindness. So it's very much seemingly parallel to your story. Do you see it that way?
Yeah, you go through life and every single person has good things that happen to them and they have bad things that happen to them. And at the end of the day, we get to choose how we want to live our life. We can live a life of sorrow, we could live a life of victimization, or we can live to be empowered individuals. And there are many people in my life who have poured into me in small and grandiose ways. And those little seeds that they planted in me when they started to sprout, it was just, it's a choice. What am I going to do with this? And I think sometimes when you look back at your past, you have to forgive others. You have to forgive yourself. Give yourself a bit of grace too, and then you have to move forward and make that decision to do the same for others. So yeah, I think for me and my journey, I could focus on the negative, or I could choose to focus on the positive and rock it out and shine brightly for other people too.
Right. I totally agree with you. As I'm reading the book, I'm thinking that we live in this really complex world, increasingly complex world. And yet one of the messages that I derive from the book is that there's a power in simplicity.
Yeah.
And so how do we promote that in schools, which are becoming more and more complex with more and more standards and more pressures placed upon teachers and administrators and students and communities? So how do we keep it simple and capture the power of the simplicity?
Well, I think, we have to remind ourselves of our purpose. And we have to remember, why did we get into education? What are we here for? And who are we serving? And when you get back to the focus of why we're here, it's easier to not get so caught up in the frenzy of everything that has to be due and everything. It's just so easy to be pulled into drama and pulled into negativity and pulled into, oh my gosh, stress out, I can't get everything done. And it's not to minimize all the things that you have to do. And this is my 23rd year in education, and I've absolutely seen this multiplication of things that we have had to do. This increased workload is just doubled and tripled and quadrupled over the course of my own career, as I'm sure it has for everyone else as well. But at the end of the day, what are you here for? Why are you still here? What brings you back to that class every day? And so when you come back to that purpose, if you start to feel frenzied, your students are feeling frenzied too.
Mm-hmm.
They feed off your energy. So sometimes it really does start with us, and we have to have almost like a little self check of what is our mindset, what is our energy, and how are we relaying that off to our students. And I feel like, if you're feeling that, take a break, take some time off, go do what you need to do to regroup,
Mm-hmm.
because your students need you.
Right.
And they need all of you. They need you in the best possible way that you can be in that classroom. And if you need to, just take a step and take a moment to yourself to do it. Come back in and be a little calmer and be a little bit more grace with your students, and they'll give that back in return. So it really
Right.
does. It starts with us.
When you were saying that, it reminds me a lot of the show The Dog Whisperer. I don't know if
Oh,
you're familiar with Susan
yeah,
Milan
I've seen that
at
before.
all. And it just reminds me a lot about child psychology. Not that obviously children are not dogs, but the psychology of the owner's state of mind and how it is passed along to the pet is in some ways analogous to the adult state of mind and how it passes along to a child, and how they're watching you exhibit certain types of emotions or certain types of reactions, and that in turn creates their own response to that, and that could be positive, or it could be negative, where they could be harping on negativity and negative energy.
Yeah, I agree with that. When I'm in the classroom working with teachers collaborating on lessons, a lot of times I'll even ask if I could start a lesson with a story or bring something out from social media that's positive and good, just to kind of set the tone, and give the kids like something else to think about that's a little different, to just that juxtaposition of, we're learning about this, but wait, we're listening to this. Even that little shift in
Mm-hmm.
what you're teaching, what you're doing is enough to kind of give a little jolt of, whoa, what is this? And have a different insight and mindset towards what they're learning. And it doesn't have to take long, but even just how you walk into a classroom. How do students enter your classroom? How are you greeting them? Are you there smiling and, welcoming them in, or are you frazzled and you're frustrated before the day even starts? It sets the tone for everything.
It's so true. You mentioned social media, and I wanted to ask you, do you think that social media is furthering or hindering the ability to spread kindness?
I think social media is all in how you use it. We don't have to be controlled by social media. We can be active users of platforms, and we can mold them to the way that we want to use them. So for instance, when I'm connecting with people on social media, I'm looking for kind people. I'm searching out the people that lift me up, that inspire. I'm looking for others that aren't going to be hindered by competitiveness, but are looking to be collaborators. And so because of that, when I go to my social media sites, I'm uplifted and inspired when I see what's in my feeds, because
Right.
these are the people that I'm following. These are the people that are pouring themselves out for the public, and they have the attributes and qualities that I want to have. So I feel like when we're guiding students and children, it's really important for us to remind them that they are in charge of their own social media accounts, and they can choose to limit them in certain ways. And, they don't have to feel like they're forced to do certain things just, because of peer pressure or whatever else with the social media. I do feel that it's very difficult to be a teenager, especially in these days, because social media is this wide open platform, and
Yeah.
there's not many people that are providing guidance. So anything that we can do to shine a light on how we as adults are using social media in a positive way, I feel like is going to, again, plant seeds of inspiration for them. So that way, when they make decisions about using social media, they'll make good decisions, and they'll choose to find people that can empower them.
Right, I agree. Therein lies the challenge, because as someone who works in the 712, I find that our students are very much tethered to this runaway train of social media, which is taking them into all kinds of places where they really shouldn't be,
Right.
and they're in many cases feeling like they have no control. They're just feeding into this beast
Right.
of negativity
Right.
and cyberbullying and awful language and all kinds of things that are all designed to shun people and make people feel awful, and the way they do that in gaming spaces. You had mentioned that also in your book, and how they can take what should be positive, what should be wonderful, and a way to collaborate and access all the great people like you're talking about, but yet it's not quite playing out that way yet.
Mm.
But I think there's definitely a lot of work to do moving forward as educators. I feel like any new curriculum that comes in or any new initiative that comes in has to address that. We can't just be talking about math standards and reading standards and so on without addressing the elephant in the room, which is these decisions that students are going to make using social media platforms is going to have a greater outcome or impact rather on their lives in many cases than learning these particular curricular components.
Absolutely. I mean, it definitely, the things that they post and the way they respond, it impacts their college applications. It impacts their job potential. And so I think we have a responsibility to not only be good stewards of social media ourselves, but to set up that expectation for students and guide them and help them. Right. Sometimes we assume that because they're growing up in the digital age that they know how to use those tools well, but it's not intuitive. It's not intuitive.
Definitely
so
not.
Even more reason why we need to be the good and we need to pour that good into students.
I couldn't agree with you more. One of the touching stories that you told in the book was the story of Renee.
Renee, yeah.
Your colleague. And that was very difficult to read for all the obvious reasons. Renee passed away at a very, very young age and very tragically. So what advice do you have for people who are suffering the loss of loved ones that are gone way too soon?
Well, I think, you just have to be kind to yourself. And you have to allow yourself, the time and the opportunity to grieve in whatever way makes sense for you. Some people prefer to step away and be a little bit disassociated from everything, and other people may look at them and say, oh my goodness, like, wow, I can't believe they've recovered so well, and they haven't recovered, they're not even dealing with it. They're kind of in denial,
Right.
Or they're disassociating because it is just too painful in the moment, where there's other people who are so pulled into the grieving process that they honestly are just, they just can't get through an entire day without the tears and just falling apart. And I think, when bad things happen like that, or situations happen that are way beyond our control and you are heartbroken, you just need to allow yourself just that time to just go through that process and know that you're not alone, know that it's okay. Every single person that either they've lost someone they loved or they will. It's going to happen. Right. So that's why it's even more important to make sure that you are surrounded by people who truly care about you. Surround yourself with positive people, because when those things happen, and they will, you are going to need that village of people to wrap their arms around you and lift you up and carry you in those moments when you can't walk and you can't talk and you can't function. So my advice to anyone that loses a colleague, loses a loved one, loses a child, is just give yourself grace and just know that, anything you do, one little step forward is progress, and that's enough.
Right. Well, the last question I wanted to ask you, what have you learned from becoming, or since you've become, a cultivator of kindness?
Well, I have learned that the world is actually a beautiful and bright place if you choose to look at it through that viewfinder. And I feel now that I've deemed myself a kindness cultivator and surrounded myself with other like-minded people. Every day is a new day. It's so exciting to know that you have this whole day ahead of you where you can impact so many people in a positive way, and your actions can truly change people's lives by simply being yourself and being kind. And I think when I first started this journey, I don't know that I would have recognized the power in that. I think it would have been more like a one and done, like, oh, I'm going to be nice, I'm going to be kind to somebody, and then that's it. Whereas it truly has become a thread that is woven through my soul now. But because of that, every day I wake up energized and excited to see what the day is going to hold. And at the end of the day, I'm more reflective. And I still have bad days. I still have bad things that happen to me. But now that I'm kind of wrapped up in kindness, I know that tomorrow's going to be a new day and a new opportunity to do good. And that's enough for me.
Thank you, Tamara.
Thank you.
If you'd like to follow us, it's stateofedpodcast.com on the web. You can also follow us on Apple Podcasts. You can subscribe where you can find all of our previous episodes. You can also find us on Twitter at SOE Podcast. Feel free to pick up a copy of my book, Forward Fast, Making Sense of Education in an Era of Rapid Change. Also, please pick up Tamara's book, A Passion for Kindness, Making the World a Better Place to Lead, Love, and Learn. You can also find me at Marcus6 on Twitter or Marcus6.com. Thanks so much for joining us. Have a good one.